Hi, I'm Rebecca Valcarcel. Let's look at a poem, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, by Dylan Thomas. He's an Irish poet, and this is a villanelle, which means that this poem has a certain form, and I'm just not going to describe it, but let you hear it and see if you can pick up on what the rules of this form are. It's not like a sonnet, it's a little longer, 19 lines instead of sonnets have 14 lines. And it doesn't use the kind of patterns that a sonnet does, but it definitely has patterns. So you'll listen and pick up on it. Do not go gentle into that good night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wow, it's a powerful poem, partly because of the repetition, which of course is the most noticeable element of a villanelle. So villanelle is a French form. It comes to us originally like from dances and things. And the villanelle has 19 lines, and it has these two repeating lines, almost like a chorus of a song. So you know how you have the verse and you have a chorus. But this time, these repeating lines, they come very frequently. And so immediately we have, do not go gentle into that good night, line 1. And it repeats at line 6, and line 12, and again it's toward the end, it's line 18. And then you probably noticed also rage, rage against the dying of the light. That is line 3, but then it's also line 9, line 15, and line 19. So these two lines, they must stand alone, be worth repeating, and at the same time, they must work with all the other elements of the poem, all the other lines and the logic, the plot, the characters, you might say, of the poem. And at the end, they have to work together because the final two lines are those lines. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. They rhyme. And did you notice there's a lot of other rhyme? Every line ends with either that "ite" sound or the "a" sound. So good night, and then close of day, and then the light, and then dark is right, forked no lightning, they do not go gentle that good night, and then bright, and then bay, and then light. And what it turns out is that you have these sets of 3 lines, and the middles all have the "a" sound, and then the first and third lines always have the "ite" sound. So if you want to write this kind of villanelle, a rhyming, very tightly structured one, then you need 2 sounds that have a lot of rhymes. And Dylan Thomas found "ite" and "a", and it worked really well because you've got 19 lines and they all have to either be "ite" or "a" at the end of the line. Okay, well, what does this poem mean? He's talking about death, and we know that this was written as his father was dying, which is what's alluded to at the end. So the father is dying, And instead of hoping that his father passes peacefully, or instead of hoping that the suffering will end, he has the opposite feeling. No, do not just float off into death, the good night. Do not. In fact, resist death. Rage against the dying of your light, of your life. Don't let go. Hold on. Stay here and stay with me, right? And the poem takes as an example different kinds of men. So the first stanza, it's just an opinion, an assertion that do not go gentle. In old age ought to burn and rave at the close of the day, at the end of their lives. So rage against the dying of the light. But then in the next set of lines, the next stanza, it's talking about wise men. And then in the next, it's about good men. And the one after that, wild men. So we have all these different kinds of lives, ways you could approach living. Grave men is the last one. And then we move to you, which is the father of the poet. And now you, my father, there on that sad height. And I envision that the father is up on a bed maybe. And that's the height. And of course we put our parents a bit on a pedestal, don't we? We respect them, and the older we get, the more we realize everything they've done for us and everything they've accomplished in their lives. So there's some figurative element there too of putting the father up as a respected presence in the life of the poet. But it may also just be literally a height, as in a bed or whatever he's lying on as he's dying. But let's go back through and look at these different kinds of men and what the poet has to say. So wise men at their end know dark is right. So of course wise men realize death is part of life. It's natural. It's what's coming. But because their words had forked no lightning. So because their words were not amazing and searing and it's like shocking, they do not look forward to death after all. Even though they know death is coming, they know it's natural, they wish they had done more, that their thoughts and their ideas, their words had been more important in the world or shocked people and done something great. So they do not go go gently to death. And then we have the good men. They worry that their deeds were not good enough. Their frail deeds might have danced on a green bay. And we have a lot of water image here too. And they rage against the dying of the light because their frail deeds, they weren't strong enough, and they might have done more. They might have accomplished more and maybe helped more people. So they don't relish letting go of life either. They have more to do. And then wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight. So I imagine that these are the kind of people, and here when he says men, he means, kinds of people. So wild kinds of people might be the sort who just enjoyed their life and had a lot of pleasures and adventures, and yet they learned too late, they grieved it on its way. So even those pleasures and adventures die down, they end, they go away, and they grieve when the sun sets, and they realize, well, my life is still not complete. And so they do not go gentle into death either. Grave men near death. So the grave meaning serious men, or serious people near death who see with blinding sight. Now this is a oxymoron, that they see with sight that is somehow also blinding. My take on this is that they have a realization, an understanding that makes regular sight unnecessary, in a sense that they were blind, but now they're actually blinded with realization, and they think, oh my gosh, what life was really about. Now I understand, and I missed it before. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. So this is the most mysterious line, blind eyes. So if we go along with my idea that when they've had this realization it's a blinding thought, then the eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Like with that idea of finally understanding what life is all about, maybe they could then live well, but they rage against the dying of the light because it wasn't until death that they really grasped what life was about, or what they should have done, or what it all means. So they don't want to die now when they just have it figured out. So all kinds of people, whether they're these adventurers or whether they're these wise ones, whether they're the good deed doers, or whether they are the like people trying to live a good life, the wise men who wish their words had forked more lightning, whatever kind of person you are, no, do not die. You don't want to die. And then, of course, you, my Father. So the poet turns from thinking about all the kinds of ways that we might approach life, ways of living, and the kinds of people that are out there, but now we zoom in to the Father, who is dying, and we say, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears. So the Son is conflicted. Curse me or bless me, but be here, stay with me with your fierce tears. And they almost rhyme, right? Fierce and tears. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. So don't die, even if your tears are going to be a curse, or even if they're going to be a blessing. Whatever this is we're doing here, please stay. I don't want to lose you. It's a sad poem, and it's also a bit of a angry poem, or an insistent poem. I wouldn't say, angry in the sense of throwing things, but dissatisfied with the fact that death is going to take away the Father, and is going to put an end to all these different sorts of lives, the grave men, the wise men, the wild men. Nobody quite feels like life is enough, that there's quite enough. And so he's not at all resigned to death. He is not at peace with this next stage. And this conflictedness shows, and actually his indignant, affronted kind of attitude shows through when he says, do not go, and resist it, and stay here. Well, I can kind of relate to this poem. If you want to find more Dylan Thomas, you will. He's a very famous Irish poet, and I hope you enjoyed this first taste of his work. Do not go gentle into that good night.